While Casse Aerospace bears the name of an engineering legend, the company itself has faded from memory for all but the most dedicated ship enthusiasts. Or, at least, that was the case for over a century, until Anvil Aerospace resurrected one of Casey's designs, and alongside it, interest in the man himself and the ships he built. An Edelson Design Institute Hall of Fame inductee in 2902, Leonard Casse has earned a place in the annals of history as one of the top ship visionaries of the Mezzer era. While the general populace may wind up considering his creation of the Hurricane Fighter the most enduring part of his legacy, his effect on the industry overall is not limited to that one design. Cited by ship design luminaries such as J. Harris Arnold, Silas Kroner, and Jules Paralig as a prime source of inspiration, Casey's influence can be seen in many spacecraft being flown today. From the humble RSI Aurora to the mighty Anvil Hornet, several of the Empire's most popular vehicles can trace their lineage to Casey's unique vision. Hired fresh out of university, Casse began his career as a junior aerospace engineer for RSI in 2587, securing himself a position on the Starbright transport team. This simple and functional ship, often referred to as the Aurora's spiritual predecessor, had been redesigned for the 2590 model year release and was about to go into full production. Assigned to review the machining specs for the ventral hull piece before the manufacturing run began, Casse noticed that the updated nozzle placement, while adding fuel efficiency, was going to cause potential dangerous additional stresses to the ship's frame. He promptly reported his findings to the Starbright's lead designer, only to be told that the effect was negligible and that he should trust the more experienced members of the team. Unsatisfied with that result, Casse took his report directly to the head of the company, CEO Thessaly Vanowen. Impressed with the young engineer, Vanowen ordered a separate independent team to audit the Starbright's testing results. 2 weeks later, the project was completely halted for a total rework of the internal struts. The 2590 Starbright would now be released in 2591, with Casse promoted to a full engineer on the team. His rise after that was rapid. In the year 2595, Casse was named lead designer for the 2600 Starbright. RSI saw the new century as the perfect time to relaunch the Starbright and was hoping that Casse would be an ideal candidate to revitalize the aging ship line. He did not disappoint. Rebuilt from the ground up, the 2600 series of Starbright was praised for its innovative entry system and all-new custom IFCS that integrated flawlessly with the ship's thrusters for unmatched responsiveness. What was previously thought of as just another transport became elevated to a flying experience that everyone should have the pleasure of enjoying. Even today, centuries later even, collectors still covet the 2600 Starbright for their personal fleets. Perhaps what makes it so valued, though, even beyond its quality, is that it would be the only ship Casse designed for RSI. As soon as the assembly line began rolling out the ship he had labored on for close to 4 years, Casse announced that by 2599 he would be leaving to start his own company. According to later biographers, Casse described his time at RSI as a constant struggle. From that first instance, when his suggestions were passed over due to his junior status, he felt that the good design was too often sacrificed in order to placate a hierarchical organization trying to justify their own worth. He wrote, "As soon as you have a ship manufacturing company where almost half the people who work there have nothing to do with manufacturing ships, you're going to have problems. He swore that the company he was building, Casse Aerospace, would be different. He would only hire a small team of people whom he could trust to do quality work at the standards he demanded, and then he would leave them to do their work. Everyone's opinion would have equal weight, with all the final decisions left to himself. It was an unorthodox method of ship manufacturing, but under the strong vision and guidance of Casse, the flat organization style worked. By 2604, the Verse witnessed its first Casse Aerospace ship, the limited-run Cosmo sloop. A leisure craft with a focus on ease of use, the hull premiered the open circle signet and curved wings that Casse would use on all his future designs. The reviews of this cutting-edge craft were universally positive, but unfortunately the timing of the ship's release would prove to be its undoing. The Second Tevarin War had begun the year prior, and with enemy forces pushing their way through humanity's defenses, the personal leisure craft market bottomed out. With all their fortunes riding on the sale of the Cosmo, Casse Aerospace found themselves struggling to keep their fledgling company afloat and decided that the best course of action was to join the war effort. The Tevarin fleet had undergone significant tech upgrades during their exodus, and the UEE Navy forces were having a difficult time overcoming their new flank shields. In 2605, Navy officials called upon the Empire's ship manufacturers for a solution to these failing shield systems. Though he had never worked on a combat ship before, Casse knew that the credits of such a lucrative contract would surely save his company, and so set he was to designing the solution to humanity's current problems. Analyzing battle footage of naval forces engaging the Tevarin led Casse to the conclusion that trying to overwhelm the failing shields was a losing proposition. The bulk of damage that the Navy was able to inflict occurred when the Tevarin was caught off guard. The goal of his design would be to increase the frequency with which those opportunities would occur and maximize the damage inflicted during them. To help his ships achieve this goal, he borrowed a page from the enemy's playbook. If the Tevarin were operating in teams of two, one pilot and one shield operator, his ship could also be manned by a team, a pilot and a turret gunner. The design he submitted to the Navy stood in sharp contrast to those submitted by industry leaders like Aegis, and it surprised many when the Navy granted a contract to the unusual contender. Casse Aerospace immediately began work on what would later become the Hurricane. Launched in 2607, the Casse Hurricane suffered some setbacks during the testing phase. Though pilots liked the power-to-weight ratio and extra punch its quad turret offered, the high degree of coordination needed between the pilot and the gunner had a very steep learning curve. Because of this, the Hurricane didn't enter active combat until 2609. While they were used to devastating effect in a few instrumental actions, the war ended shortly after their deployment in 2610. Trying to capitalize on the success of the Hurricane, Casse Aerospace used the goodwill they had garnered to win a contract designing long-range patrol ships to guard the growing Xi'an front. However, before that ship could be finished, Leonard Casse tragically passed away in 2615 after being involved in a deadly in-atmosphere collision. Reeling from the loss of their founder and leader, Casse Aerospace attempted to finish the project. But without Casse's personal involvement, military officials lost confidence and pulled the plug. Surviving off continued Hurricane sales, Casse Aerospace attempted to return to their roots and release an updated Cosmo, but again, without Casse's behind the project, it was not a commercial success. Things were looking dire for the company And when the Navy announced that the Hurricane would be retired from active duty, it signaled the end. The market was soon flush with surplus Hurricanes, and any remaining new sales dried up. With little options remaining, the board sold the company to an investment firm. From there, it passed hands several times before falling into receivership and becoming nothing more than a footnote of history for the next century. When J. Harris Arnold was in school, he was obsessed with the works of Leonard Casse. To him, the mostly forgotten engineer represented everything he loved about ship design. When he eventually started his own ship manufacturing company, Arnold drew heavy inspiration from Casse's business model and ships for his own designs, utilizing such signature elements as the curved wings and open circle signet of Casse. The similarities were such that Arnold and his fledgling company, Anvil Aerospace, was sued by the holding firm who had bought the rights to Casse's designs. Arnold decided to settle the case by purchasing all of Casse's aerospace portfolio himself. Now, the owner of Casse's legacy, Arnold sought an opportunity to put the company's original designs to use, but one that didn't present itself for close to 70 years. The UEE was suffering as Vandal attacks in Caliban grew in frequency, in a manner similar to the ones that led to the fall of Virgil and Tiber systems. Eager to turn their efforts around, the Navy brass were looking for a new ship that would enable their pilots to cut engagement times down. Their theory was that the faster a Vandal fighter could be taken out, the less opportunity it would have to cause human casualties. Anvil proved the solution in the form of the resurrected Hurricane. The updated design still bore all the hallmarks of Casse's original, but with the addition of Anvil's proven combat expertise. The result was a game-changer for the war effort, and in 2878, a new generation of Navy pilots began to use the Hurricane to devastating effect. Today, Casse and the company he built have finally taken their proper place in history books, thanks to the efforts of Arnold and others who have sought to keep their memory alive. While he may not have only designed 3 ships in his lifetime, Leonard Casse contributions extend well beyond what he left in the shipyard, and he has inspired countless numbers to see the universe a little bit differently. The plaque honoring him in the Edelson Design Institute Hall of Fame cites a fitting Casse quotation: "Good design solves a problem. Bad design creates new ones." Thank you for tuning in to this reading of Casse Aerospace, a portfolio of the company. This was published in Comlink on April 10, 2019. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. Okay. Whew. Okay, let's do a little bit of commentary here. Casse Aerospace is something I promised in a few videos ago when I did Anvil. Anvil Aerospace was under J. Arnold. You heard it in here. It kind of wrapped around to him. And as I promised in the comments of that video, or the description I should say, I discovered this after the fact. The Galactopedia article for Casse Aerospace is only like 1 paragraph, and it's not too much there. But there's an entire portfolio. So I vowed to get back to this one. I've had it sitting in my tabs and on my browser, and dang it, I did. So it feels good. I batted for the fences a little bit, so forgive me if the pronunciations were a little weird. I just had fun. Also, I'm using a new audio chain here. Because I use different audio plugins, I can fiddle with them a little bit. And so let me know what you think of the audio if you're into that type of thing. And for the record, the functional components I make these videos out of, like the speech elements, the quotations where I change voices, those type of things. If you don't like certain voices, please chime in. I've had some feedback. I do appreciate even negative feedback, whether it's on the comments here or if you want to talk to me in private on Discord, RedJay, #0001. Okay, let's get into the lore where really you guys want to, and gals want to talk. Casse Aerospace is something that has a long, long lineage. You're talking about the Hurricane, you're talking about the Hornet, you're talking about some amazing ships that truly trace their history back. And there's other ships that are really interesting in here. Like, I would not discount the chance of seeing something like the Cosmo. And this is in my commentary on Anvil. That had a lot of Aegis elements at the beginning of that one. I re-listened to the entire thing and took some whiteboard notes while I was thinking about it for this one. But I mentioned in that video in the commentary that I would love to see some of the earlier ships between the Zeus and everything else. And, the Tally is one of the oldest ships, etc., etc., the Gladiator. These are some cool ships. I'd like to see some non-combat ships. And to me, the Cosmos sloop would be something really beautiful. And on the flip side, so like a space yacht, if you didn't tune into that part of this reading. And another one that really caught my ear was the 2600, the year 2600 model of the Starbright. I would love to see something that Casse really sunk his teeth into, and his team of engineers put together something really, really fun like that. And also because it's an RSI ship that was designed by Casse Aerospace, technically, because he took a lot of the ideas he had there and ended up making what defines the Casse Aerospace design, and then what that later influenced many other people, but particularly Jay Arnold's team over at Anvil. So to me, the 2600 Starbright would be a really cool ship to have in game. And once again, that would be a transport ship. So the Cosmos sloop for luxury, and also the 2600 Starbright would be really cool ships. And if we don't want to make them fully functional ships, like I can dream, but if it's unlikely, at least make little models of them. Make them little hangar Flair and hab Flair for future when we have those things. And you can put them in your ship, you can put them in your hab, you can put them in your whatever. CIG, less roosters, less animals. They're fun, but once in a while, make some more ship models. I really miss I think it's called the Tasakami models. I have a whole collection of those things. They used to give them away in the early days of StarCitizen, and I hope to see a lot of that hangar Flair brought back and purchasable in game by players who didn't get the chance to have it in game prior. That would be really cool to have. Like, you can earn UEC and then you can go into a store and there's like a gift shop, so to speak, next to your persistent hangar where you can purchase different Flair items for in the hangar. And once again, this should be really cheap stuff like 400 UEC, 1000 UEC, etc. And yes, you won't have it in your website hangar, but who cares? Most of them don't even have a preview picture on the website hangars there because they're so old. But I would love to see some of that old content brought back. And for those who are collectors and are like, well, wait a minute, that means that my stuff isn't as rare, just add a slightly different, put a label at the bottom or something that indicates it's newer. Making a new model release. We've done that in the past. Or different color pathway. But still, it'd be cool to see these things at least as models, preferably, I can dream, as full-fledged ships that you can fly. Or at least something that's sitting inside the New Deal hangar, New Deal shipyard, sales area and such, that you can maybe even just walk around, but it's not a full-fledged ship that you can open every piece of it. Just write on there that it's not, a functional ship. It's more of just a piece of history. A lot like visiting, old commercial and military fighter jets and Lear jets and such, and seeing the old 707 parked in a museum with its engines deactivated and such. That'd be fine. But anyway, what I think about Casse Aerospace is that they're a turning point in the design of one of the most important things in our game, whether we like it or not. Ships. One of the most important things in the game is going to be having these ships, and because most of your game is made or broken by what you fly and what you can get running, I think somebody like Casse that has just a incredible vision and dedication to safe ship travel is an admirable task, and I'm glad to see that he was recognized in the lore for his contributions and for his team's hard work. And I like, once again,
just taking a step back, I like when the lore mentions the team members. It's a shame there wasn't a few more names. We had a couple in RSI like Vinoan and such, but it would have been cool to see the rank and file lead engineers under Casse at his new company and when Casse Aerospace was formed. And it would be kind of cool to find out what happened to them. Did they retire just retire with it with their heads held high, or did they start their own startups after Casse Aerospace fell? Or did they move to other companies? Did they take some of those influences with them? There's so many ways you can go with these topics, and it would be really fun. Another thing that this covers really nicely is it covers a little bit of the Second Tevarin War, and the turning point for the Tevarin War, Second Tevarin War, was the use of the Hurricane. The Tevarin had these new shields that were basically incredibly strong, and basically had to have you had to surprise them with an incredible amount of burst damage. The Hurricane can bring that quad cannon to bear as long as your gunner and your pilot are coordinated, and that was what was basically able to turn the fights in some cases. You notice that the war ended shortly after they were out there, and it certainly wasn't won just by the Hurricanes, the few that made it out to the battlefields, but it is interesting to note that. And there were so many in surplus that there was issues with selling new ones. I think it would be interesting to see Vanduul incursions that are going to be system-wide in some cases, when the Vanduul tribes bring the king ships and dozens of drillers and all these massive ships from large class all the way up to capital class. I would even say, dare I say, super capital. I would classify a king ship as a final boss. I would argue, but take that what you will. I would love to see basically the UEE Navy start selling off some of their surplus material. So basically, okay, we didn't lose as much as we thought we would because the players did their job, and then ... we can sell some of these surplus ships back to the CDF because we can't afford to maintain all these craft. We can't even take them all home in the Bengals, and the Idris and such. So let's just basically sell off some of these, and that would be a really cool, quiet reward for a lot of players to suddenly get their hands on maybe some military hardware that we don't usually get our hands on. Slightly stripped down versions. I mentioned before that it would be really nice to see F7As in the hands of civilians, especially because the F8A exists. So for those who don't know, the F8 Lightning is the preeminent dogfighter of the UEE Navy. The F7A is the aging Hornet that's designed for military. Just a reminder, what we have in our hangars is like the F7C, the F7CM, the F7T with the tracker system, the F7AT, for example, or the Ghost. So all these different variants are all part of the C model, which has been demilled, and it was built from the ground up really to just be for civilians. It would be really cool to see some of those military variants as rewards. Contribute enough, and you help protect the system from the dastardly Vanduul, and you have enough reputation, and you're not a pirate, you're not this, you're not that, you can get your hands on an F7A. I think that would be really cool. And in the lore, we see it already, that the military does enjoy selling off the surplus ships, especially these smaller craft, like, for example, in this example, military Hurricanes, onto the civilian market. The CDF is already kind of a follow-through. If you think of the lore of the war bond sales, the UEE Navy has authorized the CDF to sell these ships to better equip civilians for service and sell these military, like, for example, that was the Polaris episode, the Polaris advertisement. It kind of went along those lines. So I see that as a path for us to get our hands on those type of military ships, if CIG wants it, and maybe they, and once again, they're not overpowered. You can't take you could even have a whole herd of F7As, but if the UEE Navy has to take out players or the advocacy, they could just bring F8As. The real preeminent dogfighter now, not the aging F7As. That would be just interesting to note. So that's what I got on Casse Aerospace. I'm not going to beat the dead horse on the topics that I already covered. If you haven't already listened to my video on Anvil Aerospace's portfolio, please do so. I'll add it to the link at the end. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks again. Fly safe. Have a good evening.